The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
And we welcome to the show, the episode, the Department of Conversation award-winning country music artist, Kaylee Bell. Kaylee, good morning to you.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, mate. And yourself?
Nothing to complain about, really.
I feel like we've kind of done a bit of a reverse here, because you're from the neck of the woods that I'm sitting in, and I'm from the neck of the woods that you're sitting in, and so we've done a bit of a reversal
better
thing.
Better at the moment, I think. We're still in semi-like lockdown, and the weather has just been atrocious. Whereas I feel like down south, you guys seem to be getting some nice days, which is South Island sunny days for me are like, there's nothing better, because it's like you dress for winter and it's crisp, but the sky is blue, and it's just like, it's everything that winter should be.
Yeah, so I'm in Dunedin, you're in Auckland. For people who, I should probably announce where we are, because people go, well, where did you used to live? I'm in Dunedin, you're in Auckland. You're from Waimate, which is just north of Dunedin. And I moved here 8 years ago to Dunedin. And since being here, as you say, cool, crisp days, you know, when you leave the North Island and come to the South Island, people are like, oh, it's going to be cold. Oh, it's going to be cold. And one of my responses was always, well, how much do you spend on a week for rent? And they were like, well, $600. And I go, well, I'll take your first week's rent. I'll buy some thermals, and then I'll probably be okay the other 51 weeks of the year. That used to shut them up pretty quickly. But I've discovered since being here that winter is probably my favorite season. And one of the reasons is, the last couple of places I lived were in the Waitakere Ranges in West Auckland, which is actually technically and literally a rainforest. Down here in winter, there is 1/3 the rainfall that there was when I was in West Auckland. And so those clear blue crisp days, it might only be a high of 7 degrees or a 10 or 11 or 12, but those crisp blue sky, like there is today as I look out my studio door, are my favorite days. Well, hands down, my favorite days. It's amazing.
They're magic. And Auckland is like just insanely impossible to get any washing dry, because it's like the day, even in summer, the day will start beautiful and you're like, this is great. And just always rain. I just cannot believe how much it rained in Auckland. Like I missed that in the brief before I moved here. But yeah, I mean, the South Island is I just think it's the most magical place on earth. And yeah, blessed to have grown up there and very jealous that you're now there.
Well, let's talk a bit about you. You are someone who has made sort of some headlines. For someone like me, who is not a big country music listener. I mean, I think you'd probably say most of the population of the world is probably mostly exposed to country music when there's a crossover with pop. That's probably the time, because that's when it would hit the normal charts, and that pop stations would start playing it. But I'm not a big listener to, probably because of access. Although with Spotify and stuff, you can't really claim that. But it's not part of my upbringing. So for the country music scene in New Zealand, to me feels small, but I could be wrong with that. But you are someone who's made some pretty big inroads recently, including being named. You can give us the correct title, but like, I'll just explain what it is and you can give us a title. Spotify was looking for some of the faces of Australasia to use on their imagery, their branding, and you have become one of the faces of Spotify, representing sort of all music in New Zealand and Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a female-led playlist, so it's called Equal, and it's only really it's a quite new thing. It sort of started about 6 months ago, and it's just a new initiative. They've sort of like accepted that on a lot of playlisting, just how it happens. And I mean, it's a conscious thing too, but like a lot of them are very male driven, and especially in country music, like obviously country music comes from America, where its sort of roots are like, and where it's I think it's like the number 1 or number 2 genre in America. So like when you talk about like not knowing much country, it's because we don't get it here. And like you go to the States and you jump in a taxi or you walk into shops and it's literally playing everywhere. So it's like, it is a big genre over there, but it's very male kind of driven. And there's a lot of like talk around that at the moment, particularly at country radio in America. And so it's awesome that someone like Spotify, or such a giant in music, have like starting to do something about that. And yeah, it was an honour to be obviously named the face of the New Zealand Australian sort of campaign. And like I said, it's just female led, but it's all genres, which I think is really cool too, because I just think females are so incredible. Like, I think in the last sort of like 5 to 10 years, I've really noticed it with females like really carving out their own lanes. And it's such an honor to to have been recognized. And obviously Spotify have been a massive support and part in kind of accessing my music, because like you say, it's not very easy to find here in New Zealand, in the country that I live, that I'm from, like, which is really, it's been a big constant like battle over the years. So it's we're really lucky to have that outlet now. And yeah, what they've done is really, really cool.
It's interesting that you would talk about the market in America, because I get it. America is so big, 340 million people, you get a 1% share of that audience. It's a massive audience for you. So it's fantastic. But because I understand the same, like with religious or Christian-y type music as well. I mean, most countries in the world, it doesn't rate at all, but in America, there is a full marketplace for it. And some of those artists make, flipping good money and that. And I'm not trying to compare, say, country as a small market and a small percentage in a big market, because I understand it's a big market. But yeah, that Goliath that is America, I think must help and support a lot of artistic outputs that other parts of the world don't get much of a look in, purely because of its size.
Absolutely. That's like honestly what it comes down to, is population. And that's kind of, I think when I turned 18 and kind of had the chance to stay here or like go and travel and be somewhere where I could actually have the chance of having a career, it was kind of a no-brainer. And it was purely population. Even the Australian market, it's still small in Australia, country music, but it's bigger than here purely because of population. So yeah, it's one of those things, and just the accessibility of it. That's why I love things like Spotify and Apple Music now, because people kind of get a lot more choice over what they listen to. Whereas it was always labels and radio were the big giants, and if you weren't signed, you didn't really get a lot of say. And so, like, for me, I'm an independent artist, and to be getting these opportunities like without a label is amazing, to be honest. Like, it's really even changed my own wiring of how I've thought about it, because for so long I've been like, have to get a label, like that's how anything happens. But honestly, it's been such a role reversal now, and I think independent artists just have so much more power now than they've ever had, and that comes down to fans like listening to their music and deciding what they like and what they don't.
Yeah, for sure. I can remember a particular moment where that seemed to be starting to happen, and it was actually, funnily enough, another Kiwi artist, but who made it massive in the UK, Daniel Bedingfield, when he was on Top of the Pops. I nearly said Pop of the Top of the Pop. And I remember watching it in New Zealand, thinking, who is this guy? Never heard of him, didn't know anything about him. When did a Google search on him? And he kind of had almost no results in Google. And that's because he had done it all himself. He had recorded whichever the name of that first hit he had song was in his so the barrier to entry to recording had dropped because he recorded it in his bedroom, did it himself. And now what I think you're seeing is a flow on and a following of the barrier to the marketplace is dropping. I mean, not that this is a comparison to what you're doing, but there are people like me who are have television broadcast studios in their houses now. There are people like you who are recording, releasing their own music from their own houses and stuff now, because that entry or that barrier to entry seems to not be completely gone, because there is still an investment, but compared to what it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, is non-existent.
Absolutely. It's like removing the gatekeeper almost.
Yeah.
And I've been reading a lot of like biographies and autobiographies and things lately of artists, and it's been quite mind-blowing, like the amount of artists that, like Keith Urban's a perfect example. I just got his Rolling Stone magazine yesterday that he's in, and he talks about, like his biggest record was a record called Golden Road, and it's had like platinum. Just everything off that record is basically like just blown up. It's all platinum, and it's been his biggest hits. And he actually says that when he recorded that, he took it to the label head, and the label head listened and was like, I don't hear anything on there.
Wow.
I love now that it's like you literally just make something and you hand it to the fans and they decide. Yeah. it just blew my mind because I was like, how many other artists have had that happen to them where we haven't heard what could have been something great because someone decided no before it had even had a chance to have a life, you know?
It feels like in music, and you're the expert, not me here, but there is still a bit of a tipping point. Like I think about Lorde, for example. Now, Lorde was recording and releasing her stuff on SoundCloud. She was signed by Sony, but she was recording and releasing it on SoundCloud herself. And is it one called Tennis Court? The one, I think it's called Tennis Court, isn't it? And then Royals were there, but then they got boosted by the industry to give her a #1 hit in the US for 8 straight weeks with Royals. So it seems that the tipping point at the moment is there is the ability, the barrier to entry is gone. You can enter, but maybe to get access to the inner sanctum, there are still maybe some gatekeepers there which haven't quite been taken down yet. But probably it's only a matter of time. And I follow quite a lot of comedians, and when you see what comedians are doing online and comedians are doing with things like podcasts, and then starting up their own production houses and hosting their own live events, and their fans are coming to their stuff and their fans are buying their stuff. Again, in America, so big at marketplace, it seems that those perhaps gatekeepers to the inner sanctum, maybe their time is whatever a word for reducing is beckoning, is yearning, is falling away. But it still feels like it's there at the moment.
Yeah, it is. And I do honestly think maybe it will always be there. And I think there is definitely like a place for labels, but it's the adapting thing that I think probably needs to happen a little bit more. And I just think it's nice now that it's more of a choice. Like you don't necessarily have to be signed to have success, which is nice. And so, yeah, I still think both those worlds are great. I think the label thing has its place and it's awesome, but I just love that as an independent artist, you just have access to anything now. It's great.
Yeah, it is cool. And it seems more and more that it's about, I mean, they used to say it's not what you know, it's who you know. But then maybe the who you know thing kind of works a bit better now as well. Because if you know someone, because we're all connected through things like Twitter and Instagram, so it's a lot easier to get a message to a who you know type person, So and then maybe go from there.
Nashville was the place that really it still blows my mind about just that 1 degree of separation because oh my goodness, like you go to Nashville and you write with someone one day and then you go to coffee the next day and that person knows that person, and you go to a bar and you're watching that. It's like it's mind-blowing over there, and like you think America's huge, blah blah blah, but it's so small in the connection world. Like constantly just blows my mind how just proves like you've always got to be nice to people because everybody knows everybody. It's a good lesson.
And that person can then blow you up as well. Like I think as a comedian, again, there's a guy called Kyle Dunnigan in America who does a lot of impersonations and that, but he's very, very funny. And Joe Rogan's podcast didn't find him. He had 40,000 Instagram followers at the time. But when Joe Rogan started talking about him, he went from 40 to 100 to 200 to 250. And I don't know what he's on now, but it must be 1 million plus followers. And it started with Joe Rogan going, you should check this guy out. He's flipping amazing. He's so funny. And because of those gatekeepers being gone, he's massive now. It's amazing.
That's cool, and that's such an honor for him too, to have someone that obviously in the same field that respects him, and it's kind of like a bit of an endorsement when that kind of thing happens, but it's nice when it's organic, and that's what's been cool this week about everything that's been going on. It was unexpected, it happened, and it was something that I hadn't had to force, which is really nice because this industry, you're constantly like working behind the scenes to make things happen. And so when something actually unexpected happens, it's always just so much nicer.
So when you say unexpected, are we talking about what we're looking at in the big screen right here? Jumping back a bit to being one of the faces of Spotify, this was one of the headlines I saw online and in the ODT as well, was the girl from Waimate makes it to kind of Times Square. I don't know how many stories this is. It looks like it's about 20 story high picture of you in Times Square with Spotify.
It's one hell of a sign. Like if you even needed a sign, that was it. But yeah, as I said, it was fully unexpected. I had no idea. And the Spotify team in America just sent it through the picture, and I kind of just stared at it for ages. And I have the thing that just I love about this whole thing is that like I say, I'm independent. So self-managed, everything is like done in-house here, and I have a really small little team. I have two of my best friends. Kate Wilson does all my like styling and creative, and another friend, Jenny Haraway, does all my hair and makeup. And then we just have another friend, Christian, guy that works here locally in Auckland. And it's usually just the four of us that go out on these shoots or do music videos or whatever it is that we're up to. And so when things like this happen, like, it's literally just so awesome for all of us, because, you know, like, we all have to kind of work day jobs to make things happen. And we literally just kind of, I don't know, we just do things on an instinct, and we always feel this kind of magic when we're working together. But, you know, it's a constant struggle. So it's like, when amazing things like this happen, it's like, it feels like such a celebration for all of us, because it's like, it just proves that you can kind of do anything these days. Like, you really can, if you want to work hard and you love it. And like, you know, we just randomly shot some pictures at the start of the year for some music stuff that we had going on, and never ever thinking, you know, one of Christian's pictures would one day end up in bloody Times Square, you know, like, it's insane.
So do you see, when this happens, right, do you see a tangible difference? Like, the next day, did you have an extra 1,000 Instagram followers, or did you have another 10,000 followers on Spotify? Do you have a tangible way of seeing what this does to your exposure? I mean, without sounding like I'm being flippant, because I'm not, but other than a photo being up in a square somewhere in the world.
Yeah, totally. I guess that's the difference these days, right? With you know, social media and even Spotify. It's really cool on Spotify because you can see where people are listening, how old they are. Like, it narrows it right down to like towns. It's really cool. And then there's constant like little graphs that tell you, like, you know, the waves that things go through. So yeah, from I think it was Tuesday that happened, my numbers jumped like crazy on
Wow.
on my socials. I think they went up like 1,000 that day. And then obviously just noticed it in the streaming and things over the week as well, which is really cool, because I mean, we have the access now to see that. And it's nice that people, you know, look at that and actually like might go and find and discover music, because I know that I do. Like, I love seeing something that'll be like, oh, I wonder who that is. And like, I'm constantly like searching for new artists or songwriters. Like, I'm obsessed with that kind of part of the industry and discovering new things. And, you know, not necessarily a certain genre, I just love discovering new stuff. So I have that happen to like myself. It's really cool.
You're talking earlier about the playlist and the representation of females amongst all music, but in country. I was thinking, as you were saying that, I reckon that I probably know more female country artists than male. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I was multitasking. I was thinking about it and listening at the same time. But I was thinking, I wondered if maybe females, and I'm thinking about the Taylor Swifts of the world and that, like, have been more successful in the crossover than the male country artists. And that's why people who around the world, I mean, I'm only speaking from myself here, but maybe feel like I could name more female than males. And it's purely because maybe they're more successful in the crossover. Is there any truth in that, do you think? Or is that just my personal experience and nothing else?
No, I think that's actually an amazing insight, because when I think about that, I also think of like Shania was one of the first to cross.
Yeah.
90s, Dixie Chicks.
Yep, absolutely.
So absolutely, there's a lot to be
Carrie
said
Underwood comes to mind.
Carrie Underwood, yeah. But I mean, even for as successful as she's been, she's never been played on radio here in New Zealand, which to me is crazy, because she's like the most successful Idol winner of all time, whereas Kelly Clarkson has been played here. You know, so it's like, so why hasn't Carrie been played here?
I think Kelly Clarkson got played here because she had that very first hit, though. It was quite a rocky. I think that was like a worldwide smash. I think that's probably. I don't know about why. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like in America it's a problem because, like I said, on radio, in terms of breaking new artists, and it's like I don't even know what the percentage is anymore, but it's crazy out of control how much it is like men to women on the top 100 charts and things. And you know, there's been artists like Casey Musgrave who's gone and won Grammys, and she still won't get played on country radio.
Wow.
Taylor's basically been shunned from country radio now because she crossed into the pop world.
She's too pop.
Yeah, so it's it's an interesting conversation, and I think because of it, it's made females, like I said, really carve out their own lanes, and that's probably why you have heard of a lot of females, because they've had to really make it really clear what they do and kind of just become better, which is kind of cool in a sense as well. Whereas I think the males in country music are a lot more cookie cutter, and it's like same thing, different guy, same thing, different guy. Like, yeah.
With access to everything these days, it's fun. I'm thinking about what I said earlier about not having a lot of exposure to country, but obviously with things like Spotify and Apple Music and various other platforms, everyone's got access to everything last night. In fact, my 15-year-old said to me last night, she goes, "Dad, do I have good taste in music?" And it was a kind of out of left field sort of a question. And I went, "Yeah," and she was like, "I don't know." And I was like, I think about my 15-year-old this day. Think about when I was her age, a million years ago, listening to music that was 10, 20, 30 years old. It was horrific, whereas she right now has, and when I say she, meaning all kids, all teenagers, all people, have access to every bit of music that there's ever been, sort of, or certainly a level of it at any time they want, in their pockets with this.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Like, I mean, we used to have to, illegally download something on LimeWire, and the whole family computer blew up. Like, we've come a really long way for accessibility in a really short space of time.
Well, that's even showing the difference between you and I, right? Because I used to have to hear it on the radio. So I'm very much of the world of Napster and that when it came out, but it wasn't my teenage years. So I used to, so for me, it was hearing it on the radio, or, the very first tape I ever bought was Beastie Boys' License to Ill, and I've still got some tapes and some LPs and CDs lying around. My generation, or my teenage years, was sort of that whatever the word is, transition into CDs are based. I'm the child of CDs.
I still love CDs. I really do. I've got tapes are so cool.
So I'd have to hear it on the radio, and if you didn't hear it, or whatever. Whereas my kids are like, they'll be singing a song, and I realize it's because they've fucking heard it on Glee, which drives me wild. And then I'm not because there's anything wrong with Glee, because it's a secondary version of what an amazing song may be. So I go and jump into Spotify and I look up the original song and show them where it came from and show them what it is. But they're exposed to all these things. And I think now there's also a bit of a trend back to 80s music. So you hear all this 80s music and movies aimed at their age group. And so she's got an amazing, and I think most kids today, whether they know it or not, would have an amazing taste in music, because they're exposed to so much of it at all times, unlike what I was, and maybe secondarily to unlock what like you were, even though there was the online thing as you were coming through.
It's insane, and I love watching the trends come and go. And like, I was a massive Alanis Morissette, and I love 80s rock, bangers, and I feel like we're starting to come back there. We went through a bit of a lull where everything's been really soft and stripped back, and now I feel like artists like Pink and even Ed Sheeran, I think, with just hearing choruses that actually hit you in the guts, I feel like we've been missing that for a while. And so I'm excited, and to hear I think Olivia Rodriguez has got some guitars again, some actual electric guitars, and it's just so nice to hear that production thing come back around, because everything it's just a big old trend that keeps coming, like you say, and all these songs that these kids are hearing now, like you say, they've been around for 50 years, these songs, and it's cool that they're discovering them. I love that people are reinventing them, so at least they're getting heard. But for those of us that know, the originals are yeah,
but it's an education. I mean, and also for someone like me, I discovered, maybe a bit more so once online music became more accessible, how much, I mean, I'm not a child of the 60s, that's way before my time, but how much I love the music of the 60s, and I've got playlists and stuff on Spotify at the moment through all the Stevie Wonders of the world, and it's for someone, for all of us, discovering music from from outside what is current. Those things are amazing, and you're fully involved with Spotify as one of their faces now, so how exciting is that?
It's insane, because I feel like Spotify has more or less kind of introduced me to the world in many ways. Being from the bottom of the earth, it's like I said, you can access where people are listening, and the fact that people are listening in countries that I've never been to or towns I've never, it's quite unreal. And so, I released a song back in, I think it was 2016, called Getting Closer, which was like the first song that they like really picked up, and it like got playlisted on a bunch of the big American country playlists. And it's that's been the kind of start of it for me, which, I feel like Spotify have been a big part of my journey so far. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a bit as well about the New Zealand music scene. Now, I started this conversation, this chat, by talking about me not having a lot of exposure to country music. And maybe that reflects a little bit about my upbringing. And when I was at school, there wasn't online music to search through everything. So you could only get either what you purchased or what you heard on the radio, pretty much. But also, I think that might be echoed, and you can talk to this because you are in New Zealand an award-winning country music artist. But I'd really like to learn a bit more about it, because I look at the New Zealand music charts and I can see the single, the album, the hot single, the New Zealand single, and also the Te Reo single. I'm assuming there are no New Zealand country music charts. Am I right in that assumption or wrong?
No, you're 100% correct. Yep. So these charts are like largely based on radio and then also streaming numbers. So, I mean, unless you have a song hit radio or you have really solid streaming numbers, you're probably never going to find your song on these charts. I was really lucky this year, actually, because I have had a song break into the mainstream in New Zealand, which has been a goal of mine for a really long time, because just doubling back to what you were talking about, growing up and not hearing country music, that is 100% true. Like, none of my friends grew up liking country music. The fact I sing country music is only because my family were into it, and so it was just like a natural thing that I did. But it was something that we did in the weekends, and I didn't talk about it at school during the week because nobody talked about it, because nobody heard it. And I really do think there's been like a whole generation in New Zealand miss out on hearing country music on the radio.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that because, like, for example, this latest single of mine called That Summer, that's had some success here on radio, on mainstream finally. I was in The Edge recently doing an interview, and the girl that was interviewing me, she's only about 20, 21, and she's like, I love country music, like, and like rolling off all these names. And I was like, that's amazing, because like, so her generation now is aware of country music, but like back my generation, like the last 20 years or so, I just feel like it's been completely missing in New Zealand society. And so that's been such a big thing for me, is like to get a song on mainstream radio here has been like my number one goal, because I just think until people hear it again, it's just something that doesn't get talked about, because it's like you don't like what you don't hear. And so like these collabs like with Pink and Keith Urban are great, because it's like people are starting to finally, it's sort of slowly like and subtly filtering back into people's listening, and they're kind of like, oh, is that country? Like you get that all the time. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that was country. And it's like, you wouldn't, because you haven't heard it in New Zealand on radio for like 20 years. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and I don't know why that is, but I'm just like determined to kind of normalize it again. And I think it's evolved so much, and it's so close to pop now, country, that it's like it would be normal if you heard country on the radio now, because it's like Dan and Shay just did a song with Justin Bieber. Like it's all these collabs, and all this genre stuff is just blending, and it's it's really, I don't know, I just think the genre thing is kind of starting to go out the window a little bit, which is cool. And so yeah, getting a song on radio this year obviously meant that I was on those charts, which was really cool. But yeah, there's no country chart in New Zealand. Just because I guess like no kind of radio that would be able to align with that. Yeah.
Maybe the interaction you had with the Edge host, who was 21, that just speaks to exactly what we're saying, because did you say she was, anyway, the person has access to all the music, so they pick what they like. Whereas a 21-year-old in the 1990s didn't have that, so didn't hear it. So that maybe just echoes exactly what we've been saying, that this particular host goes and finds what they like, and that particular host likes a bunch of country.
Totally.
Easy.
And they have started playing, like I said, a few collabs. Like there's a bit of like Sam Hunt and some like really kind of mainstream American country artists starting to get some play here. And it's it's just those slow little, like it only takes one song and one artist for people to be like, I like that, and then they go listen to, like on Spotify what's similar, and next minute they've just listened to country music and they haven't even known it. It's like, yeah.
You've mentioned Keith Urban a couple of times, and you got a chance to perform with him. What was it, 2016? Yeah, end of 2016.
Yeah.
December 2016. Because he had a song which was called "We Are Us." That was the official was done with Miranda Lambert. So I'm assuming that you say on your Facebook page, and there's an image of it up for people who are watching, that he needed a female voice, and you got to perform with him on stage, and he's obviously someone who's impacted or continues to impact you as a country artist.
Yeah, I mean, Keith's amazing. So I moved to Australia when I was 21 and entered this competition called Toyota Star Maker, which is like a big contest up in Tamworth. It's got a massive prize, and it's sort of like a kick-starting career entry into the scene over there. And so I went over there and entered it, and I was lucky enough to win it, which was amazing. And Keith actually won it back in 1990 when he was starting his career.
Oh, cool.
So through that, they kind of aligned us and put us together, and I got to sing with him over in Australia on his first tour back in like 2014, I think it was. And we just got on really well, and he's just so normal and so nice. And then he came back out to New Zealand in 2016, where these pictures are from, and he just reached out, and it was really cool because his mum was over, and he had quite a bit of family there, and Carrie Underwood was doing the support, and my sister flew up with me, and he actually just like let us come the night before. We were sound checking and stuff, and we just hung out for like, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 hours just hanging out with his mum, and it was just such a cool I mean, I just look at someone like him who's so successful, and he's got such a great sense of humor, and he's so nice, and it's just so nice to know that you don't have to be an arsehole to be successful in this industry.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, there's just been things where our paths have kind of aligned. He's from New Zealand, and obviously like the Aussie, the Star Maker thing, and now the Nashville thing. It's he's just been kind of there, and he'll listen to my music and tell me what he thinks, or it's just been a really cool friendship and connection that's kind of carried on.
You went on, and I won't play the music to this because there are algorithms and stuff, and even though I'm sure it'll be fine with you, what happens when you play a piece of music is you get pulled from YouTube, and then you have to challenge saying, I've been talking to the artist, and this is the artist's video, and it takes a week to get it taken down. So I'm not playing the music for it right now for people who are listening to this podcast, but we're looking at a music video called Keith. Now, this is, I was going to say you're a love letter. I don't want to make it sound weird because he's a friend of yours, but is this like your homage to this person who you look up to so much, a song about Keith Urban?
Yeah, it was all very accidental. Like I had this idea in the middle of the night, just a little voice memo with this melody, and it was like I kind of had like these Keith titles coming. Like when I listened back the next day, I was like, I can kind of hear some Keith stuff in there, and I just started writing out the song of like using his song titles. And I was like, how could I tell a story through his song titles? And so the idea kind of just sat on my phone for like 2 years before I actually did anything with it, because it was kind of one of those things. Like I didn't want it to be weird and creepy. And then I was in Nashville, and I was writing with 2 of my Australian friends, Phil Barton and Lindsay Rhymes, who I do a lot of work with, and they are big Keith fans and know the scene really well. And so we wrote it in like 40 minutes. It was like one of the fastest songs we have ever written, and just felt really good and felt really easy. And then again, I held on to it. Like once Lindsay produced it all, and I sat on it for another 9 months or so, because it was like, I love the song, but everyone I'd send it to in Nashville would be like, don't release that. Like that is career suicide. Like blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? So I just sat on it for ages. And then it just got to a point where I was like, you know what? I actually really, like, I love the song. I love playing it live. People have started showing a bit of interest when I've been playing it just at my acoustic shows or whatever. And so I put it out, and it's actually gone on to be like my biggest song. And just last week, it's it's past like 5 million streams, and I think Casey Chambers is like the only other female artist from Australasia to have done that with her massive songs back in the day that were kind of, you know, I think they were even sort of put out there into the world as pop songs anyway. But yeah, so it's been a really massive like kind of journey, this song, and we just love playing it live. And yeah, I've had the chance to talk to Keith about it, and it's just been a really cool thing.
What did he say about the song?
He said that it reminded him of what Taylor Swift had done for Tim McGraw when she wrote her song.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, I just, like I said, it was like a very innocent kind of idea that came, and I was like, I don't know if anybody or if I'd ever seen that before, you know, like titles written into a song, and I was just kind of wanted to at least have a go at it, and yeah, it's just so fun to play.
Yeah, it's cool. I think that's cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, you don't want it to be weird or anything, but it's obviously, and should we say it's showing admiration. Do you know if what Nicole thinks of the song? Is that
I don't know, actually.
Wonder if the missus is going, oh, this young lady is writing your song, Keith. What's going on here?
Security.
Where was that one filmed? The music video we were just watching but not listening to?
That was in Nashville, actually. We did 2 videos for that. We did like a live one down in Wanaka. We used to headline this New Year's show down there called Top Paddock. And so we did like a live thing first, and then I just always wanted to do a video for this, like a proper one. So when I was in Nashville, we put it together and had a creepy dive bar in Nashville, which there's plenty of around that place. And yeah, just had some like young local actors jump in and play the part, which was really cool.
It seems maybe some of your more recent videos, and we're looking at that summer here, are more, and I'm just flicking through it for people who are listening, more showcasing some of New Zealand. You seem to have, you know, whether it's home, whether it's that summer, correct me if I'm wrong, but they appear to be around New Zealand. Is this a conscious decision to show some of your homeland, and, you know, people internationally love New Zealand, or is it just purely, and unfortunately because, you know, these things coming out in the last year, it's COVID and you're sort of stuck here, or is it a bit of both?
Well, it's a combination of things. I mean, finance. You know, music videos aren't cheap. Obviously, we live in the most beautiful part of the world. So,
yep.
You know, South Island. And the thing about the South Island, we actually recently shot a music video that's coming out very soon down in the Clay Cliffs in Amarama. And for anybody that hasn't seen them before, you would actually swear you were in America. And that's the thing about New Zealand. Like, our scenery is so diverse, yet sometimes you look at it and you're like, I have no idea where I am. Like, I feel like I could be in Switzerland, or like, I just think we have everything you could possibly need on our back doorstep. And I just think the quality of what we make over here is amazing. And like I said, I have a really small team who I love working with. So it's kind of like a no-brainer. And they'll always, the Clay Cliffs. And like, you're literally just driving along the road through Amarama, and then they just like appear out of nowhere. So we had an epic few days shooting. It was in winter, so it was actually freezing cold, which was the only thing. But it was a beautiful day like this, like blue sky. The farmer that owns the property let us like go right up the back, up the top of the cliffs, which was really, really amazing. And it's a collab coming out soon with an American girl, and she's shooting her part over in the States. So that's kind of like the next project. And I would love to just keep doing my music videos. That summer one we did in Bethel's Beach, Taylor Swift shot her music video for, I think it was Out of the Woods there. I mean, the fact that she came over and shot in New Zealand, it's like, it says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, same can be said for all the, you know, the international movie things. I mean, part of it is obviously the American dollar here is good for them to come and do it, but also obviously when sort of money is, like, I remember hearing a story about Top Gear, and this is not about Top Gear coming to New Zealand for the scenery, but, and this is from someone who worked for Top Gear, so it's firsthand information. Each of their episodes had no budget. Now, when I say that, most of us think, oh, shit, I've got no budget to do X, Y, Z, meaning don't have enough money. No, I mean, they had no budget. Their budget was limitless.
Right.
And like the story that was told was about when they were in Auckland on Waiheke Island, Jeremy Clarkson couldn't find the kind of cigarettes he wanted, so they sent a helicopter back to Auckland to get Clarkson his cigarette. Now, that's a little bit of gossip side note here, but the point being,
I love it. Mention that.
Big productions don't worry about money was the reason for that story.
Okay, so they can literally shoot anywhere they want, right?
Yeah. So in other words, even though it would be good to shoot in New Zealand for the American dollar or the pound or whatever, when money is not an object, it doesn't actually matter. So they're mostly here for the scenery. I mean, some big productions come here for things like the tax credits as well, but still, it all comes down to the scenery, what we look like, and how we operate.
Right? I mean, we're pretty funny.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to talk to you a bit about Nashville as well. I had friends who lived in Nashville for 6 or 7 years with a band, and they've come back to New Zealand recently, and they're still doing that. I was wondering first, you know how you hear about people being in LA and every barista is an actor. Is it the same in Nashville? Is every barista like a country artist or a musician trying to break into the scene? Is it that circle, like the acting circle in LA?
Yeah, no, it's insane. Like, the person pouring your coffee is always going to be like a singer or a guitarist in a band, or like, that's what I love about Nashville. It's like everybody earns their stripes. They call Nashville the 10-year town. You have to be there for 10 years before they're going to give you a shot. Like, you have to earn your stripes, and it's very big on community, and that's one thing that I love about Nashville. Like I was saying, like, you'll write with someone one day, you'll bump into them the next day, you'll go, and like, everybody's connected, and you just make friends really quickly in Nashville, because everyone's always out and about, and you'll go and meet someone for coffee for no other reason than to connect with them, because you already know they're in the industry. Like, like, I feel like in New Zealand, you come in, if you're going to meet someone for coffee, it's usually for a reason, or it's an old friend or whatever. Whereas over there on a normal week, I'll be meeting like 10 or 11 new random people for coffee for no other reason than to just like go and meet them for coffee and connect. And we're bound to have mutual friends, and you'll find out what they do. And at some point you'll end up working with them again, or they'll connect you to someone that you will. And it's like, it's such a small little community over there, even though it's a big city, like there's a few million people that live there. Yeah. So that's one of the best things about Nashville. I think that anybody that's had success in Nashville has like worked their ass off. Like, it does not get handed to you by any means over there. Like, they make you work and earn it, which is really quite cool.
And how does it work for you? Because I'm thinking, you've identified yourself as independent a few times in here, or non-signed, whichever is the correct, I was going to say pronoun these days. So you're based, I guess you're splitting, but obviously with COVID on at the moment, as someone who was signed, I would think if they were going to Nashville, the record label would put them up and do all that kind of stuff. As someone who's not signed, how does it all work? Have you got like a place over there and a place here? Do you just look and rent for a place when you go over there? Like, how does the actual physical living between two countries work, especially when you're non-signed artist?
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. I have friends that I stay with, which I'm really lucky. The first couple of times I ever went, because I've been going back and forth for about 12 years now, but the first time I went, I was like 21, and I went for a month and stayed at the most horrendous like motels that like still scare me to this day when I look back. Like, there's a lot to be said for being naive. And, even like just thinking that you could walk everywhere and it would be fine, and you'd be out late at night watching it was just the whole thing. I look back, I'm like, whew. So now I stay with friends, which is really nice. And I have a really cool friend, her name's Heather Morgan. She's amazing. She's written a bunch of #1 songs, and she actually came to New Zealand for one of our APRA song hubs a couple of years ago. And we just got on really well, and we went over to Waiheke and just spent some time together. And she's like awesome, because she's always out on the road, or like she's a real floating kind of person, because she's always hustling. So she just I just have a bedroom at her place and come and go as I want, which is amazing. It's in a place called 12 South, which is like a really cool part of Nashville. And yeah, I mean, it's a hustle. Like, I go over there, and sometimes I'll go over with like for 3 months with 4 or 5 things locked in. But that's the beautiful part about Nashville. You go and things happen. Like, that's what I've learned. There's not a lot of pre-planning that can be done, because people don't really like to lock themselves in Nashville. Everyone's quite like, yeah, we could do that, or my buddy, or like, but like to actually lock people in is quite hard sometimes. So it's easier to be there and do it in person and go for like, I found it's easy to go for like 3 months so that I've got a bit of time up my sleeve to tell people like, yeah, I'm around for ages, like let's ride, and then eventually it happens. But yeah, it is hard without a label because, like you say, a label will lock a lot of things in for you and people will turn up. Whereas when you're doing it independently, it's kind of always a little bit of a gamble. But I'm just lucky that I've got enough like core people that I've made friends with over the years that I know are like my go-tos, that I'm at least going to get to write with them more. Yeah.
Have you been, because you've been going backwards and forwards for a few years now, have you been in a situation where you've seen someone go from barista to sort of number one? Like, have you witnessed that at all yourself?
Yeah, I have. I mean, one of my coolest, the coolest stories is when I moved to Australia. Like I said, I was 21, and there was a guy over there doing well at the time called Morgan Evans, and he like just kind of took me under his wing, and we'd ride all the time. And I opened for a lot of his shows around Australia, and then he moved to Nashville about 5 or 6 years later, and he's now married to Kelsey Ballerini, who's like one of the biggest country stars right now. But he actually got signed to Warner Nashville, and he had a number one on radio 2 years ago, which is amazing. To watch his journey, you know, and he's had to do it from the side of the world as well. He had to do what I kind of done, where take little trips at a time, like working your way up to kind of justify the visa and all that kind of thing. Then he moved there with no label, and it's incredibly daunting moving to a place like Nashville where everybody is an artist and everybody's really good. And he did that, and he hustled, and he had those like times of like just being incredibly lonely and wondering what he's doing with his life, and you know, all those sorts of things that build so much character. And so to have seen him like just succeed the way he has is just like so inspiring, and he's such a nice person as well. So it's like even better when it happens to someone that deserves it and they're a cool person. It's like, it's been really amazing to watch his kind of just star go, because we always knew he was good, but to kind of like have that sort of success in America, there's a lot of stars that need to align. So that's been really cool to witness.
Is it true to think then, kind of just basing on what you've just said, because I talk to my kids often, well, not often, but I talk to my kids about, you know, they're all into music and no, I don't talk to them very much. I try and ignore them most of the time. Now my kids are all very dramatic and they're musical and that sort of thing. And we've had conversations around, you know, I want to be an actor, or I want to be a musician, or I want to be this. And I'm like, go for it. You know, you never squash a plan, but it's always good to think about the reality of that as well. And I wonder about, you know, are you the best violinist in your school? Well, no. Okay, well, if you're not the best violinist in your school, that probably means you're not the best violinist in Otago, which probably means you're not the best violinist in the South Island or New Zealand. And how many violinists, or whatever the thing you're trying to do, young people out there, do you think actually make it to being in a place where they can sustain themselves financially, you know, as a career? And the answer is not many. And I do this really carefully, not to squash there, because I'm like, go for it, but be aware. You know, like if you want to be an actor, go for it. But here's a good idea. Look, why don't we go to university and study acting as well? And then it's very easy once you do everything. And let's say the unforeseen happens and you don't become a multimillionaire actor in Hollywood. Like, of course, we're all expecting that. But if it doesn't happen, you know, you've got a fantastic career. You can go and get a year of teaching qualification as well. You're a drama teacher, working in schools, working with kids. There's other things you can do. And I know a lot of people say if you have a plan B, you'll never, you know, shoot for your plan A. But as a parent, sometimes I find balancing act between going, you know, go for it, absolutely go for it, do what you want to do. You know, you're only young once. There's that, and I don't know if you know, this might be too young, but there's an old song called the Sunscreen Song, and one of the lines is something like, some of the most interesting 40-year-olds still don't know what they want to be. And I agree with that. Yeah, and I agree with it too. So I'm not someone who wants to squash people into a box, but you also want to see your kids have, you know, security and prosperity and be able to look after themselves and that sort of thing as well. So it's a fine balancing act. So my long-winded question was going to be, I often think about people like Adele, you know, who's had this amazing career, you know, number ones all over the world, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But I suspect there's probably plenty of singers better than her singing on Friday night down the pub with their covers band, you know, just better singers. not to take away from her, but it makes me always think there's got to be like I talk about, making art, whatever that is, and going, I feel like to be successful, you always have to have a particular moment or a particular lucky break. Or for me, for example, it'll be a particular interview or a whatever that blows you up. And that doesn't mean that that person is the best at what they do. It means that they're incredibly good at what they do, but they've had a break or they've had a chance or they've had a connection. Is that as it actually is within the industry, do you think?
Honestly, I think this game is like literally 90% hard work, and persistence. Like I look back at times where I might have considered not giving up, but maybe like even when I was living in Aussie, I was about to sort of reconsider whether I was going to stay there, and then I won Star Maker, which opened up a whole nother set of new doors.
Right.
And to me, it was like, holy moly, like that was literally only because I didn't give up. Like there's so much to be said for that. Hard work, not giving up, and also putting yourself where the opportunities are, I think is a big thing. If I sat here in New Zealand for the last 10 years and complained that there was no country music on the radio and blah, 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 like I would have done nothing with my life. Like that's just the reality, because there was no opportunities here. And so I think it's really important to like take those risks and go and put yourself where there is actually a chance of an opportunity. And if that means that you're going to America and you're waiting tables or doing a shitty job for 5 years, 10 years before something happens, like do it. Like if that's what you want to do it. Because I just think, there's so many things that have to align. And so it is a funny one, because you talk about plan B, but plan B could be like, waiting tables just to survive. Or for me, I just got a teaching degree recently, just so at least I could like relieve teach to keep myself, financially secure. But it's like, you don't necessarily need like plan B career path, but you just need to know that you're going to have a shitty day job at some point if you really want to be able to do this thing that you love, because things don't happen overnight. I don't think necessarily, especially in this arts world, whether you're an actor or a singer or a muso or whatever, it's like, it's going to take time. And so you need to know and be prepared that you're going to have to do other things during that time to allow you to do that one thing that you love to do. But I do, as I say, think persistence is just so important.
So it sounds like plan B, as you're describing it, is more plan B to pay the bills, not necessarily plan B career wise. So, I got to pay my rent or my mortgage or my whatever. I need to nail that down, but there's only one plan for what I'm trying to attempt right now.
Yeah, and because I just think if you're spreading yourself so thinly, it just makes it's just hard. Like it's hard anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's like all your energy really does need to be focused on that, and this is just kind of feeding into that and keeping you off the street and paying the bills, like you say. Like that's kind of how I've sort of seen plan B work for a lot of artists. And perfect example would be Morgan, like I just talked about. He never had another career path. He just had jobs to allow him to survive and to allow him to go and spend 3 months in America at a time and then come back and work a job to allow that to happen again, where he was going and putting himself in those positions of opportunity.
So thinking about, Kaylee Bell and where Kaylee Bell is going to be in 5 years from now, what is I know it's sometimes difficult at the moment because we've got to account for COVID as well. But putting that aside, in an ideal world, what do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be? What's the goal? Like if I'm trying to get a podcast with you in 5 years from now, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, I would have played the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, which is like, it's the motherhood. I really would love to like tour a lot. I have been working on a live show. The last kind of 3 or 4 years, I've got a really cool band. My partner and the other guys in the band used to be in Midnight Youth, which was like a pop rock band here in New Zealand. And so they've got a lot of experience. And we've just kind of built this really cool thing that I love. And I just want to play arenas and like big shows, big production, big sound. and just be touring here, Australia and America. Like, just split my time. I think it's great with the way the world works with the seasons. It's like you can do our winter in America and then come back here for Christmas and have our summer. I think you can kind of make the best of both worlds. And like, I just want to keep changing that face of country music in New Zealand. And, you know, hopefully in a few more years' time, it will be normal and we'll hear a lot more of it on radio.
Is that something that you actively chase? Like, for example, here in New Zealand, for people who are seeing this offshore, we have a funding agency called NZ On Air. NZ On Air, because we're a small country, it's sometimes difficult to get together 50, 100, 150K to make an album, if that's what the path still is these days. So we have a government-owned funding agency that artists can apply to get money. Is there something within that model, that NZ On Air model, that needs to change to encourage more country? Is that something that needs to be sort of driven by, like, you know, at the moment, with COVID, the government has allotted a certain amount of money for local news, because we want to make sure local news is strong. And so, again, for people listening outside of New Zealand, local news organizations can apply for funding for this fund to try and help keep local news, which is imperative, strong in this country. Does something need to happen with country music, that there's like a specific and specialized country music fund in New Zealand On Air to drive people towards it, to create more of this genre, to grow it in New Zealand?
I think New Zealand On Air do like an amazing job, and I actually think they're incredibly fair, like across the board with genres anyway. And they put on these showcases, which we got to play earlier this year, which you're basically playing like 2 or 3 of your best songs to all the industry, radio, everybody. And so for me, I feel like they are really kind of holding up their part of the deal. I think where the kind of problem is sort of stemmed is actually at radio, and I think it would be really cool. Like, I remember growing up and hearing a lot of Brooke Fraser and Boronga and Bickrunga and like just Kiwis, Golden Horse, like so much Kiwi music on the radio. And I think we lost somewhere, like there was a percentage thing back there where they had to play so much.
Yep, quite.
And they different Kiwi, whereas now I think there's still a percentage, but they can just play, you know, 660 every third song and they're ticking that box. And I just would love to see kind of, you know, just a bit more diverse Kiwi music on the radio. And that comes from that actually does come from radio, from where I see it. Yeah.
Do you think, I'll be honest with you, I don't really listen to radio anymore. I mean, because if I want to listen, I listen to podcasts. And if I do tune into radio, it used to be Radio Sport, which then got cancelled at the last, lockdown. And since this new SEN started up, there's a new Radio Sport type station, which I listen to a bit, but I don't really listen to it. I'm interested in what you think the driving factors are. I mean, you talk about radio and changes need to be made at radio, but is that where people listen to music still? I know the numbers for radio haven't changed that much, because I delve quite heavily into that with another hat that I wear with work that I do. But is that really still in New Zealand the main place that people get exposed to music? I
do still think you discover a lot on radio. Okay. I think you can find other outlets, like, you know, if your song blows up enough on a streaming service, that's going to influence, you know, being played elsewhere. But I still think that a lot of the tapestry of like just our culture and things comes from radio, especially like, and that's globally, you know, like that's the same in America. Like if you get a song on radio in America, like you're off kind of thing. So yeah, I still think it does hold importance, and it's almost like that stamp of like approval, you know, like, and that whole thing, like I mentioned, not having to force things. Like if someone unexpectedly hears your song on radio when they're just going about their day-to-day life, it's like it's in their subconscious a lot more than them actively going and finding you. And it's so I still think it's a really important piece of the puzzle and kind of building careers here.
Hey Kaylee, it's been a huge amount of fun having a chat with you this morning. People want to find out more about you and what you're up to. You are KayleeBellMusic.com. It's an amazing, I love that it's one of the best ever front pages I've seen on a website. I think that's such a good shot. It's cool.
Thanks.
If people want to know more about you, connect with you, tell us the best way to do it, and then also tell us assuming COVID doesn't hit it, tell us what's coming up in the next wee while for you.
Yeah, so I've actually been working on a record that's coming out in November. So my producer Simon was stuck with us through the majority of COVID in New Zealand. Came out because their band was meant to be opening for My Chemical Romance.
Yep.
So he actually got stuck in New Zealand, which was awesome because for a whole year he lived with us and we just got to make music. And so he's just gone back to LA recently and we're just finishing off the record, which is cool. So that's coming out in November. I've got a new single coming with an American Girl very soon. And then we're booked to play a lot of festivals this summer. So hopefully we can get out and see some people on the road, which would be really, really nice this summer. And yeah, I mean, I run all my own socials. So I love hearing from people. Instagram is probably like my jam. And yeah, just want to hear from people. It's nice to connect, especially after all this lockdown stuff. It's just such a nice reminder of like how important people are for each other. Like we need people and we need to be able to talk and converse and cuddle and all those like really simple, beautiful things.
Be careful saying that and cuddle. You don't know who you know.
Yeah.
At your next gig. Hey, you know who said having a cuddle? No.
Yeah. I'm big on long cuddles too. So
do you have anything booked in the States? Have you got a ticket to Nashville or is that also literally all on hold until COVID sorts itself out?
Yeah, it's just too. I mean, I wouldn't want to get stuck over there. So yeah. We'll wait. We'll just wait. It's looking likely for next year, and I think it'll be time to kind of get over there and start working on another record sort of mid next year. So that's kind of the goal. But we just want to, like honestly play a Kiwi summer and enjoy that. That will be like a really big highlight for us because we've never really been able to play much over here over the summer, and it's been cool to get booked this year. And yeah, we're ready to go. So fingers crossed.
So, Kaylee Bell Music on Instagram, KayleeBellMusic.com. Kaylee Bell, it's been a whole bunch of fun. I hope that in 5 years from now for you, that maybe you do have those gatekeepers that keep me away from you, because that means that you've got some kind of success that warrants ignoring those little pissants from back in New Zealand.
No, it's been awesome. Thank you for reaching out. It's so good to chat. And yeah, let's hope that in 5 years' time I'm far too obnoxious.
All right, be safe in Auckland, eh?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Get you.